As I've talked about a similar situation like this before, I think I was able to further express the negative aspects of it in that video. I'll probably be linking it in the description. But with the rise of another cultural animation meme trend going around, I think it's important to come back and circle back to it and to reinforce a couple things that I talked about in that video. So, I don't think it's anything new to see cultural animation memes. Like, I didn't talk about this particular one, but I remember the 1 pound fish and very recently the Egyptian animation meme. And while I don't think it has a particular name yet, I could be mistaken. But I guess to break it down a little bit, the origins of this animation meme came from a Sonic OC, which was getting mistaken for Sonic, and it was a tweened animation meme of their character, right? Who is very clearly Egyptian inspired. And then that sort of branched out to a bunch of other Sonic characters being put into Egyptian clothing to this song, and in recent time it's just gone to other fandoms. I wanted to discuss a little bit some of the issues with doing a cultural trend or a trend based around a particular culture. As I've discussed in previous videos, while this one isn't particularly as negatively stereotypical, it does fall under some of the issues with Orientalism and, again, general stereotyping of a culture. So, for those who don't know, Orientalism is essentially the way that Western cultures view and then stereotype other cultures to the point that that stereotype is considered factual or what the actual culture is centered around. And this happens a lot. You can see it with very heavy negative stereotype and caricatures of other races. And it's no surprise that something like this has slowly crept into a couple of the animation memes because of people's lack of education on this particular topic. And while I don't think it has a lot of caricature like we've seen before in other animation memes, I think it's important to highlight that it does harbor some Orientalist views when you're not putting in the proper sort of research into ancient Egyptian culture, and instead going off of just the already westernized view you have on said clothing and whatnot. That in mind, I don't think this trend has gotten to that point that we've seen in other ones. In the 1 pound fish animation meme trend, there was a lot of really questionable things being added that were very negative racial stereotypes of Indian people, and that one was really weird. And while I don't notice anything really crazy now, it's just a little bit worrying because, you know, in a lot of these comments, they don't seem to realize that Egyptians still exist, because there's been a couple comments that are like, oh my gosh, what if the Egyptians saw this? Like, Egypt has not disappeared. They're still here, and they're still a very active and existent culture. They are not some non-existent mythical creature that existed 1,000 years ago. You know what I mean? And it just comes off as a little bit insensitive, I guess. And again, people don't do a lot of research when it comes to these animation memes because of how quick you have to do them in such short periods of time, because of the way that trends work and the way the animation meme community is structured on particularly ArtTok. But, you know, I guess my rule of thumb with this is to make sure that you're doing any cultural trend, like if it has anything to do with those sorts of topics, to make sure to do at least some proper research on what you're presenting and exactly how that can positively and negatively affect a group of people. And again, I don't think this one was inherently as racist or included as much caricatures as ones I've seen in recent, but it could very easily snowball into that route. So it's important, I think, to keep in mind. Everything aside, as long as you're doing it with taste, and remember, Egyptians are still real people who still exist and are not all like ancient, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at here. One of the things that I think was really bizarre to me too was there's a lot of people mixing up ancient Egyptians with other native cultures like the Aztecs or ancient Mayans, and it just comes off as a little weird when you say that character is so fitting for this trend when they're an entire different culture structured completely differently. If it's an Egyptian particularly inspired character, I don't really see much of an issue with it, or not stereotyping the clothing, I think that's fine. Some of these negative stereotypes are being reinforced by these animation meme trends, and to just keep that in mind, especially when you're talking about different cultures and not doing the proper research, because not every Middle Eastern culture is the same, and they're all very distinct in their practices, and just keep that in mind, I guess, because sometimes I'm noticing a lot of people overlapping those sorts of different cultures together, and they're not the same thing. And, you know, overall, I don't think this trend is inherently negative or stereotypical if you're doing it properly, and I don't know, I think it's an okay trend. It's just not my cup of tea. It's important to keep all of these in mind when doing any sort of cultural trend, is to do the proper research and to make sure you know the intent of posting things. Of course, I've talked about the more negative cultural animation memes, and again, I'll keep that linked in the description. I just wanted to talk about this a little bit for future reference, and yeah. Bye!